Christopher Nolan didn't just make a movie about atomic bomb creator Robert Oppenheimer. He turned it into a documentary that has a lot more truth to it than 90% of Netflix full-fledged documentaries with dark-skinned Cleopatras and Hannibals. Still, a movie is a movie, and some of the details are real. The stories in Oppenheimer's are blurred, some are understated and some are corrected. So in the next couple minutes, we'll compare Nolan's movie to real events. If you haven't seen it yet, don't worry, our clip is unlikely to reveal any major spoilers. He was born in 1904 in New York City. The movie, for the sake of drama, forgets about Robert's family, but Oppenheimer's parents were very wealthy. Enough to hush up the case of the poisoned apple that Robert planted on his mentor Patrick Blackett. The scientist relationship didn't work out, and this is a point the movie brings out perfectly. Oppenheimers really didn't like working in their lab from a young age, preferring theoretical physics and big thinking. Blackett scored him for that. So the hard student Oppenheimer decided to treat him to a poisoned apple. In the movie, to maintain a positive halo, the apple Robert eventually take himself and no one learned anything. But in reality, the scandal has risen, a lot of scandal, and the parents of the future creator of the atomic bomb had to spend a lot of money to get away with probation and visit to a psychiatrist. Oppenheimer really needed it because all his friends noted the tendency to self-destruction. Robert smoked a lot, forgot to eat, and was prone to depression. This point the movie showed perfectly. However, the movie didn't dwell on Oppenheimer's scientific achievements. There, Robert was joked about the lack of Nobel Prize, called a politician, and forgot about science. The genius of the scientist like no one disputes, but Christopher Nolan does not emphasize Robert's achievements, and even before joining the Manhattan Project in bulk. Oppenheimer calculated the probabilities of quantum transitions together with Max Born published one of the most cited in the history of science article on the quantum motion of the molecules, and also predicted the existence of the positron. The Nobel Prize was given for less. Meanwhile, Oppenheimer also predicted the gravitational collapse of stars, after which they turn into neutron stars or black holes. He was nominated for the main scientific prize of the planet, Robert, as many as 3 times. But mostly for political reasons, he never received it. However, according to most scientists, the prize and so would have been in Oppenheimer's pocket for gravitational collapse. Just in the future, the scientists unfortunately looked too far into the future and proved the phenomenon after his death. In general, don't underestimate Robert's genius in the scientific field. The fact that Oppenheimer was taken in the Manhattan Project is not a coincidence, and the city right in the desert to create an atomic bomb was really built. Los Alamos had 75,000 people at its peak and another 15 were located nearby. The construction of the atomic bomb was an incredibly large-scale project, and in the city were erected parks, stores, schools, and all of the necessary infrastructure which Christopher Nolan for filming was built entirely right next to the real Los Alamos. According to Matt Damon, it was even possible to live there. When the camera was turned on, the actors themselves chose where to stand, at the which building to shoot a scene in, and where to work. In general, this is the maximum realism. Matt Damon, by the way, plays General Leslie Groves. It is he, not Oppenheimer, was the head of the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer was only the head of the science department, but Groves made all the decisions. By the way, there is a funny story behind this. After all, initially the project to create an atomic bomb was given to the military, and accordingly all scientists planned to give all officers positions, and in connection with which Robert Oppenheimer even ordered a uniform of a colonel, and once it was put on. Later the idea was abandoned, but in the movie there is a scene with Oppenheimer in uniform, although they don't explain it in context as much as we did. During his time at Los Alamos, Robert became a legend. He was able to maneuver between scientists with different political and scientific views, was versed in issues from quantum mechanics to laying pipelines, and became an ideal leader. The Manhattan Project workers were mostly split over the use of the atomic bomb and the creation of other more powerful ones. The movie showed this in great detail. First, the fact that at the initial stage of World War II, in principle all scientists agreed on the need to create such a weapon. After all, the legendary Werner Heisenberg worked on for Germany. Secondly, the hacks like Edward Teller, who wanted to develop a more powerful hydrogen bomb almost immediately after the atomic bomb, are shown perfectly. Oppenheimer would oppose the idea, but for the reasons we'll cover later, Robert would fall out of favor with the US government. And so in 1952, as shown in the movie, Teller is given the title of father of the hydrogen bomb. Third, Oppenheimer perfectly showed the moment after which American scientists stopped believing that the Germans would build the bomb faster. They listened to intelligence that claims Germany was using heavy water as a retarder, after which they relaxed, saying that the Germans had gone in the wrong directions, which is completely true. In 1939, Germany was a year and a half ahead of everyone else on the planet in the development of atomic weapons. But then for economic reasons, they chose to use heavy water rather than graphite. This is an erroneous way, which the Americans had already tried and knew about long ago. Therefore, everyone was aware that Germany wouldn't get a nuclear bomb before the end of World War II. Hence, the unnecessary friction in the team. After all, a lot of people thought that maybe they shouldn't open Pandora's box in such a case. After all, there was not zero probability that the explosion of the atomic bomb will cause a chain reaction and turn the Earth into a mini sun which will burn. Oppenheimer even asked Einstein about this in the movie. And it's all true, right down to the detonation of the first bomb. The chance of that happening was considered small but not zero. But Edward Teller would later calculate that it was in fact zero, but Oppenheimer would by then have rebranded himself as a proponent of nuclear deterrence. There will be a small conflict between the men, which the movie also shows perfectly, like Robert Oppenheimer's marked relationship with the Communist Party. He did marry Kitty Punin, who had been a member of the party but had left it for ideological reasons, and indeed at the same time had an affair with Jan Tetlock, an ardent communist with mental health problems. In addition, Oppenheimer donated money to Republicans who fought against the Nazis in the Civil War. There is a nuance because the Spanish Republicans were mostly supported by communists. We all remember how they were treated in the US after World War II, and in this light, Oppenheimer's ties to the Communist Party later played a cruel joke on him. But before that, he tried to use his prestige and popularity for the good of humanity. Robert, as an advisor to the Atomic Energy Commission, insisted that the UN set up a supranational body that would own all the nuclear facilities on the planet to be used only for energy. Of course, due to mutual suspicions of the USA and the USSR, the project never got a future. There is, however, one more nuance that the movie doesn't focus on. Oppenheimer didn't turn into an ardent pacifist after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He continued to create tactical nuclear bombs for US Army and was very complimentary of Edward Teller's work on the hydrogen bomb. Concerns about its power were raised by Oppenheimer. The movie gives the impression that Robert was condemned precisely because of them. In reality, the reasons for the political persecution of Oppenheimer, which began in the 1950s, was a banal mudslinging between the parties. The hydrogen bomb was built for the Air Force. Oppenheimer was working for the Army. The two organizations had lobbies in the government to get funding and so on. That's where Louis Strauss, played by Robert Downey Jr. in the movie, came in. He had a personal beef with Oppenheimer over political statements and banal jealousy because Strauss also dreamed of becoming a recognized scientist. And so recalled Robert his ties to the communists, a strange position of the hydrogen bomb, as well as emotionality and unstable psyche. The scientist's security clearance was revoked, de facto depriving him of his public sector livelihood in the public sector, causing quite a storm in the scientific community. The creator of the hydrogen bomb, Edward Teller, for his testimony against Oppenheimer, was effectively boycotted for life. Strauss was denied a place in government, and Werner von Braun openly joked that in Britain, Robert was rather given a knighthood that even considered trying him. On May 20, 2009, declassified documents of the US intelligence services were presented at the Woodrow Wilson Institute. They acknowledged attempts to recruit Oppenheimer, but it was noted that none of them were successful. Despite a bunch of communist acquaintances, Robert didn't betray the United States. Moreover, it was revealed that while working on the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer also quietly fired several hidden communists without telling anyone about their political views, so as not to ruin the scientist's career. In general, wasn't the movie that in the scientific community after the scandalous case in 1954, Robert Oppenheimer had the title of martyr. It was noted that the scientist actively shared the names of communist scientists in closed interrogations. History is rarely black or white. As for Robert himself, in 1965 he was diagnosed with laryngeal cancer. Self-destruction unfortunately didn't do the scientist any good, and in 1967, despite numerous attempts at treatment, he slipped into a coma and died, leaving behind a controversial but insanely interesting investigation. And it's great that it's been made into a movie by one of the best directors of our time, and he was so meticulous about it that documentary filmmakers should learn a thing or two.